It's strange how Christmas always feels safe. Maybe it's the lights, the carols, the smell of pine and cinnamon filling the air. Or maybe it's because we want to believe that nothing bad can happen during a time meant for love and family. But what if I told you that behind all those glowing windows and cheerful songs, there are darker stories? Stories that remind us how fragile that sense of safety really is. Tonight, I want to tell you 3 true Christmas horror stories. Stories that don't begin with monsters or ghosts, but with ordinary people. People who were just trying to enjoy the holidays. Each of them believed it would be a night filled with warmth, laughter, and family. None of them expected what came next. The thing about Christmas is that it has a way of amplifying emotions. Joy feels bigger, but so does loneliness. And when the world outside is covered in silence, when the streets are empty and snow muffles every sound, sometimes the quiet becomes too deep, too still. That's when the strange things tend to happen. The first time I heard one of these stories, I didn't believe it. Who would? A Christmas night turning into a nightmare sounds like something out of a movie. But as I dug deeper, I realized each of these stories had witnesses, police reports, and details too specific to ignore. Whether you believe them or not, I'll let you decide. But remember, each of them started just like any other Christmas Eve. It was the kind of night where everything felt picture perfect. Houses lined the streets with glowing lights, the air smelled like hot chocolate, and families gathered around fireplaces. Kids were still awake, trying to catch a glimpse of Santa. And somewhere out there, someone was staring at a frosted window, unaware that their life was about to change forever. One of those people was a man named Daniel. He lived alone just outside a quiet town in Oregon. His wife had passed away 2 years before, and that Christmas was supposed to be his first attempt at celebrating again. He decorated the house, cooked himself dinner, and tried to make peace with the silence. But as the clock struck midnight, he heard something, 3 slow knocks at his door. Not loud, not desperate. Just deliberate. When he opened it, there was no one there. Only fresh snow. And yet, there were footprints, bare footprints, leading from the woods straight to his porch. He tried to tell himself it was just kids playing a prank, but the prints were small, child-sized, and they stopped right at his door. That's how Daniel's story begins. But we'll come back to him later. The second story takes us miles away across a frozen highway in Canada. A woman named Leah was driving home from a Christmas Eve party. The roads were empty, the radio played soft carols, and snow was falling thick against her windshield. She almost missed the figure standing by the side of the road. It was a young girl, maybe 12 or 13, wearing a red coat, no hat, no gloves. Leah slowed down, thinking the poor kid must have gotten lost. But when she pulled over and looked back, the girl was gone. She would have kept driving, she should have, but a minute later the same girl appeared again. This time right in front of her car. Leah swerved. Her car spun out of control, skidding into a snowbank. When she came to, shaken but unhurt, she looked out into the darkness. The girl in red was standing there again, staring through the falling snow. Only now her eyes weren't empty. They were filled with something else, something almost pleading. Leah never forgot that face. But before we talk about what she found when help finally arrived, let's move to our last story. This one takes place in a small town in Maine, where a group of college friends decided to spend Christmas together in a rented cabin. It was supposed to be a weekend of fun, gifts, food, music, and a little too much wine. The cabin was old but cozy, surrounded by pine trees and the sound of a nearby creek frozen solid in the cold. That night, as the snowstorm worsened, they lost power. One of them, a guy named Chris, went to the basement to check the fuse box. He was down there for maybe 2 minutes before the others heard him scream. When they rushed down, the basement was empty. His flashlight was still on the ground, shining against the wall. And drawn in the dust, beside his footprints, were words none of them could explain. "Let him in." They thought he was playing a prank. But when they tried calling his phone, it rang once, and then they heard it ringing outside somewhere deep in the woods. That was the last night anyone saw Chris. 3 stories. 3 Christmas nights. All true, or at least true enough to haunt the people who lived through them. And the strange thing is, each one happened on a year when Christmas Eve fell on a Friday. Coincidence? Maybe. But sometimes patterns hide in plain sight. You see, every year around this time, local police departments receive strange reports. Unexplained knocks. Footprints in the snow. Calls about lost children who were never reported missing. People claim to see shadows outside their homes or hear whispers near the tree late at night. Most of it can be explained away. Some of it can't. Maybe Christmas isn't just a time for joy. Maybe it's also a time when something else walks among us. Something drawn to warmth, to lights, to laughter. Because think about it, What's the one time of year when almost every home leaves their doors unlocked, even if just for a few minutes? When strangers wander in and out, dropping gifts or visiting neighbors. When people stop paying and through those cracks sometimes something gets in. When you look at your tree tonight, remember this: every story I'm about to tell you happened to someone who thought it never could. Daniel, Leah, and Chris, all of them ordinary people who just wanted to celebrate Christmas. But instead, they ended up becoming part of something unexplainable, something that still lingers in police reports and small-town whispers. So before we dive in, I want you to picture this. The world outside is dark. The streets are empty. The only sound you hear is the wind brushing against the windows. Inside, the glow from the Christmas tree flickers softly across the room. Maybe you're holding a cup of cocoa or scrolling through your phone, thinking you're safe. Attention, believing for one night that the world is good? That's when the cracks appear. But what if someone, or something, is out there watching you through the window? What if that faint tapping you just heard wasn't the wind, but the start of your own Christmas story? Because that's exactly how it started for Daniel. It was Christmas Eve 2017. Snow had been falling all day, and the world outside his house looked like something out of a painting. White rooftops, twinkling lights, and a quiet so deep it almost felt unreal. He'd spent the evening looking through old photos of his wife, wishing he'd gone to spend the night with his sister instead. But loneliness has a strange way of keeping you still. The clock read 11:48 p.m. when he heard the first knock. 3 times. Slow. Even. He froze, unsure if he'd imagined it. When it happened again, he walked to the door, half expecting to see a neighbor or maybe a delivery mistake. But when he opened it, the world outside was silent. Snow drifted lazily in the air. No one was there. Only those small footprints, leading from the tree straight to his porch, and stopping there, like whoever made them had vanished into thin air. Daniel felt a chill crawl up his spine. He stared at those prints for a long moment, his breath visible in the cold. Then he closed the door, locked it, and tried to shake the feeling that he wasn't alone. He made himself some tea, turned on the old record player, and tried to laugh it off. But every few minutes, he found himself glancing at the window, at the edge of the glass where the reflection met the dark. At exactly midnight, the record player stopped. That's when he heard the whisper. Not loud. Just enough to freeze him where he stood. It came from behind the tree. And that's where we'll begin, and that's where we'll begin. The whisper was faint, so soft that Daniel almost convinced himself it was the house settling. He stood perfectly still, listening, his eyes fixed on the corner of the living room where the Christmas tree shimmered faintly in the dark. The colored lights blinked in slow rhythm, painting the walls red and green, like a heartbeat pulsing through the room. Then it came again. A low, drawn-out sound, almost like someone breathing his name. He set his mug down carefully, trying not to make a noise. For a moment he thought about calling someone, his sister maybe, but what would he even say? That he thought he heard a whisper? He didn't want to sound like the lonely guy losing it on Christmas Eve. So he did what most people would do, he tried to ignore it. He sat down on the couch, turned up the record player again, and stared into the soft glow of the lights. But deep down he could feel it, that sense of being watched. The kind of feeling that crawls up the back of your neck and makes every little sound feel deliberate. Outside, the wind had stopped. The snowflakes drifted lazily through the air, landing soundlessly on the porch. The world looked calm, peaceful even. But Daniel's heartbeat wouldn't slow down. He found himself glancing at the window again, half expecting to see a shadow there. When the lights on the tree flickered, he jumped. The entire room dimmed for half a second, then came back brighter than before. And then the whisper came again. This time closer. He turned toward the tree. For a long, tense moment, nothing moved. The ornaments shimmered softly. The old angel on top leaned slightly to one side. Then, behind the lowest branch, something shifted, a faint, slow movement like fabric brushing against wood. Daniel's breath caught in his throat. He crouched down slowly, peering beneath the tree. Nothing but gifts. Shiny wrapping paper. Boxes. Ribbons. And then, one of the boxes twitched. Just slightly. He froze. The air in the room felt heavy. The quiet wasn't peaceful anymore, it was suffocating. He reached for the box with a trembling hand and peeled the wrapping paper back. Beneath it was an old wooden music box. He didn't remember buying it. Didn't remember wrapping it. But there it was, carved, dusty, with a small key on its side that he hesitated. Then, slowly he turned the key. The melody that played was soft and strangely familiar, a slow lullaby that echoed through the room. It was the same tune his wife used to hum before bed. For a moment, the fear melted away. He smiled faintly, remembering her voice. But as the tune wound down, something changed. The last few notes came out warped, distorted, like the music box was groaning. And just before it stopped completely, Daniel heard it again. A whisper, faint but unmistakable. "Behind you." He spun around. But there was nothing there. The lights flickered once more, then steadied. The clock ticked softly from across the room. Daniel stood in the middle of his living room, every muscle in his body tight, his heart pounding in his chest. And then, the third knock came. 3 slow, deliberate knocks. Only this time they came from inside the house. Across the country, in that quiet stretch of highway outside Winnipeg, Leah was still stranded in her car. Snow pressed against the windshield, thick and blinding. Her hands shook as she tried to restart the engine, but it only sputtered weakly. The radio had gone dead, and all she could hear was the sound of her own breathing. She kept glancing in the rearview mirror, half expecting to see the girl again. When she'd swerved earlier, she thought for sure she'd hit her. But there was no sign of impact, no blood, nothing. Just the wind howling through the frozen air and the faint outline of trees on either side of the road. She reached for her phone, but there was no signal. Of course there wasn't. Out here, you could drive for miles without seeing another car, especially this late on Christmas Eve. Leah leaned back, trying to calm herself. Maybe it was her imagination. Maybe the snow, the dark, and the long drive were playing tricks on her. But then she noticed something: footprints. Outside her window, barely visible through the frost, were small footprints leading from the woods toward her car. She stared at them for a long time, her breath fogging the glass. The prints stopped right by her driver's side door. Someone had been standing there. Leah's pulse quickened. She locked the doors, then sat perfectly still, trying to listen over the sound of her racing heartbeat. She jerked her head toward the sound. Nothing. The darkness outside pressed against the windows, thick and endless. The tapping stopped. She tried to start the car again. Nothing. The engine coughed, then died. "Come on," she whispered, twisting the key again. That's when she heard it, a faint voice barely audible through the snow. "Are you lost?" Her breath froze in her throat. The voice sounded young. A girl's voice. Leah leaned forward, staring into the darkness beyond the windshield. And there, just beyond the reach of her headlights, she saw it again, that same red coat. The figure stood motionless, the snow swirling around her. Leah hesitated, her instincts torn between fear and compassion. "Hey," she called out, cracking the window slightly. "Are you okay?" The girl didn't move. Leah tried again, louder this time. "Do you need help?" Still nothing. Then, as Leah blinked, the girl was suddenly closer, only a few feet from the hood of the car. Leah's breath hitched. Then came the tapping. Soft at first, almost playful, like a child's hand against the glass. Tap, tap, tap. The girl's hair was dark, soaked with snow. Her eyes looked distant, unfocused, as if she wasn't really there. And around her neck hung a small silver bell that jingled faintly in the wind. Leah's instincts screamed at her to drive, to leave, to do anything but sit there staring. But something in the girl's expression stopped her. It wasn't anger. It wasn't fear. It was sadness. The girl raised one hand slowly, pointing past Leah, toward the passenger seat. Leah turned her head. And her stomach dropped. In the fogged glass of the passenger window, she could see the outline of a handprint pressed against the inside. Someone, or something, was already in the car. "Maybe he's just messing with us," Emma said, trying to sound calm. "You know Chris. He loves this kind of thing." But no one answered. The snowstorm outside was too heavy now. They couldn't see more than a few feet beyond the window. The roads were cut off. The power had been out for nearly an hour and their phones were all dead. When they found the words scrawled in the dust, "Let him in," they thought it was a joke. But now, with Chris missing and the woods completely silent, the joke didn't seem funny anymore. Mark stood by the window, his flashlight beam slicing through the snow. "I swear I saw something out there," he said quietly. "It looked like someone walking between the trees." Emma shivered. "Chris." Mark shook his head. "No, it looked taller." For a moment no one spoke. Then faintly they heard it, a sound outside. Not the wind. Not the snow. Something else. Footsteps. Slow, deliberate footsteps circling the cabin. "Lock the door," Jenna whispered. Mark crossed the room quickly, bolting the door. The footsteps stopped. They waited. The fire crackled softly. Somewhere in the distance a branch snapped. Then came a knock. 3 knocks. Just like Daniel had heard. Emma's eyes widened. "Did you hear that?" "Don't open it," Jenna hissed. But Mark was already moving. It could be Chris. What if he's freezing out there? He reached for the handle. "Mark, don't." Too late. The door creaked open slowly, letting in a rush of cold air and snow. The porch was empty. The forest beyond was a blur of white. Then they heard the whisper. From inside the cabin. That's the thing about these stories. They never start like horror movies. They start small. Ordinary. A sound. A shape. A moment of hesitation. And by the time you realize what's happening, it's too late to stop it. Daniel, Leah, Chris. 3 people who didn't know each other. 3 different nights. But each of them heard the same thing. 3 knocks. That's what connects them. Some say it's just a coincidence. Others believe it's something older. An old superstition that's been buried under Christmas traditions for centuries. There's an old folktale whispered in small towns that says if you hear 3 knocks on Christmas Eve, you should never open the door. Because the one knocking isn't looking for warmth. Is looking for a way in. So, before we dive deeper into these true stories, before we uncover what really happened to Daniel, Leah, and Chris, I'll leave you with one question. If you were alone on Christmas Eve and you heard those 3 slow knocks, would you open the door? When the sound of those 3 knocks echoed from inside his house, Daniel's whole body froze. He didn't move at first. He just stood there, staring at the front door, trying to convince himself that maybe he'd imagined it. That it had been the wind, or the pipes, or the old wooden floors shifting in the cold. But deep down he knew the sound hadn't come from outside. It had come from the hallway, from somewhere near the back of the house. He turned slowly, every creak of the floor making him flinch. The only light came from the flickering tree and the faint glow of the record player, which had stopped spinning again. The room felt heavier now, like the air itself had thickened. "Hello?" he called out. His voice cracked slightly. "Is someone there?" No answer. He waited. The silence stretched. Then came another sound, faint, scraping, almost like a child dragging something across the floor. It was coming from the kitchen. Daniel took a deep breath, grabbed the small flashlight from the drawer near the door and stepped toward the noise. His hand trembled as he clicked it on. The beam cut through the dark, landing on the hallway wall, framed pictures of him and his wife, smiling in warmer years. The sound stopped as soon as he entered the kitchen. Everything looked normal. The counter was clean, the sink empty, the small clock on the wall ticking softly. Only one thing was out of place, the back door. It was open. Just an inch, barely enough to notice, but enough to let in a thread of cold air that curled around his feet. Daniel's heart sank. He knew he'd locked it earlier. He was sure of it. He reached out, slowly pushing the door shut. The moment the latch clicked, he heard something faint behind him. A soft hum, low and rhythmic, like someone quietly singing. He turned the flashlight toward the sound. The light fell on the old wooden music box still sitting beneath the Christmas tree. The lid was open again and the lullaby was playing. But Daniel hadn't wound it. He stood there for a long moment, his breath visible in the cold air. The melody was slow, fragile, almost broken, the same song his wife used to hum every night. Then the voice joined in. Soft at first. Faint. But unmistakable. It was her voice. Daniel's chest tightened. "Claire?" he whispered, barely able to speak her name. The humming stopped. The silence that followed felt alive. He took a cautious step toward the tree, his heart pounding. He wanted to believe it, that somehow maybe his wife's spirit was here. He didn't care how impossible it sounded. Grief has a way of making the unbelievable feel like hope. He knelt beside the tree, staring at the little box. "Claire, is that you?" For a few seconds nothing happened. Then, one of the ornaments on the tree began to sway gently, even though the air was still. The lights flickered again, this time dimming until the room was swallowed in near darkness. And that's when he saw it. Just beyond the reflection of the tree in the black glass of the window, a face. Not clear, not sharp, just the faint outline of someone standing outside watching him through the glass. Daniel's breath caught. He turned quickly toward the window, raising the flashlight. The beam hit the frost-covered glass, but there was no one there. Only snow falling steadily outside. He exhaled shakily and rubbed a hand over his face. "Get a grip," he muttered. "You're tired. You're imagining things." He went to the record player and switched it off, plunging the room into silence again. The music box had stopped too. Everything was still. For a moment he actually felt calm. Maybe this was all just in his head. Maybe the loneliness, the quiet, it was getting to him. But then he noticed something on the floor. A trail of water, small dark droplets leading from the back door into the living room. He followed them slowly with the flashlight beam. They glistened faintly against the hardwood, a line of half-melted snow leading all the way to the tree. And they didn't stop there. They circled around the tree. Once, twice. Like someone, or something, had been pacing around it. Daniel swallowed hard. His pulse thundered in his ears. He crouched again, inspecting the footprints. They were small. Bare. The same size as the ones he'd seen on the porch earlier. He backed away. That's when the knock came again, 3 sharp raps. But this time they came from the hall closet. Daniel froze. His mouth went dry. He turned toward the sound, the flashlight trembling in his hand. The closet door was old, the kind that clicked shut with a stiff latch. It hadn't been opened in weeks. He took one step forward, then another. His body screamed at him to stop, to leave, but something in him needed to know. Needed to face it. When he reached the door, he hesitated, his hand hovering over the knob. "Who's there?" he whispered. Silence. Then a whisper from the other side, a child's voice. "Cold?" Daniel jerked back, his heart slamming against his ribs. He aimed the flashlight at the door. The knob turned slightly on its own, creaking. "Who are you?" he said, his voice shaking. "What do you want?" No answer. Then, slowly, the door began to open. Daniel stumbled back. The flashlight flickered. For a split second he thought he saw something move inside. A shape, small and pale, crouched low to the ground. The flashlight went out completely. Darkness swallowed the room. And in that darkness he heard footsteps. Slow, soft, moving toward him. He fumbled with the flashlight, tapping it until it flickered back to life. And when it did, the hallway was empty. The closet door was wide open, swinging gently. He stepped forward cautiously, shining the light inside. Nothing. Just coats. Boxes. The smell of dust. And then, from somewhere near his ear, so close he could feel the breath, a whisper. "Thank you." The light flickered once more, and the door slammed shut. The sound echoed through the house like thunder. Daniel stumbled back, gasping. The flashlight hit the floor, rolling away. He scrambled to pick it up, his hands shaking uncontrollably. When he finally aimed it again, the door was closed, still and perfectly normal, as if nothing had happened. He backed toward the living room, his heart racing so fast it hurt. He didn't care what he'd seen or heard anymore. He needed to get out. No. He grabbed his coat, his car keys, and yanked the front door open. The cold night air hit him hard, biting his skin. Snow was still falling, thicker now. He stepped outside, fumbling for the car door. That's when he noticed something strange. All around his house, the snow was covered in footprints. Hundreds of them. Small, bare footprints circling the house over and over, weaving through the yard, all leading back toward the woods. He stared at them in disbelief. And just before he got into the car, he heard it again, from somewhere deep in the trees. The same lullaby. The same soft, haunting hum of his wife's voice, drifting through the snow. Daniel turned slowly toward the sound. The forest was dark, but in the distance between the trees, he saw a faint glow, like candlelight moving deeper into the woods. He hesitated. The wind carried her voice again, faint and pleading this time. "Daniel, please." Tears burned his eyes. He wanted to run, to leave, to never look back, but that voice, that one word, it pulled at him like a string. He stepped forward once, twice. The snow crunched beneath his boots. And then the light vanished. The humming stopped. The woods went silent. Daniel stood there for a long time, staring into the darkness. By morning, the neighbors noticed his car still parked in the driveway, engine cold, door half open. The snow around it was untouched, no footprints leading away. And Daniel was never seen again. But sometimes, late at night, when the wind is still and the snow is fresh, people say they hear faint knocking on his old house door. 3 times. And if you listen closely, you can still hear that lullaby playing inside. Snow still covered Daniel's old house days after his disappearance. The police had come, taken pictures, and left tire marks on the frozen road. But people in the small Oregon town still whispered about him. Some said he ran off in grief, others claimed he'd gone mad from loneliness. Yet no one could explain the footprints, the hundreds of them, small, bare, circling his house like children dancing in the snow. No animals had touched the place since. Even stray dogs walked around the property, giving it a wide berth. But that story was far from the only one. Across the border, hundreds of miles away, Leah was trying to convince herself that what she saw that night on the highway wasn't real. It had been 3 days since Christmas Eve. The car had been towed, and the police chalked it up to black ice and fatigue. But Leah knew what she saw, the girl in the red coat, the footprints outside her door, and that faint voice that whispered through the snow. She couldn't sleep without seeing that pale face hovering just beyond her headlights. The strange thing was, no one else seemed to remember the storm that night. She'd asked around, even checked the local news, but there were no reports of blizzards, no stranded cars, nothing. The road was supposed to have been clear. But then what had she crashed into? Leah worked as a nurse in a small community clinic, the kind where everyone knew everyone else. She'd taken the Christmas Eve shift because she didn't have family nearby. That's why she'd been driving home so late. But now, every time she closed her eyes, she heard the jingling of that little silver bell. It got worse when she started finding small patches of melted snow near her door every morning, always in the same spot, right by the welcome mat. She told herself it was from her boots. It had to be. But she couldn't shake the feeling that someone had been there. On the third night she heard it again. Tap, tap, tap. Soft, rhythmic against her window. Her apartment was on the second floor. Leah froze in bed, her pulse racing. The sound came again, 3 slow taps just like before. She reached for her phone but the screen stayed black. No signal. The clock on her nightstand flickered once, then went out. The only light came from the soft reflection of snow outside. Taking a deep breath, she slipped out of bed and walked to the window. Her hands were shaking as she pulled the curtain aside just enough to peek out. The street below was empty. Snowflakes drifted lazily under the glow of a streetlight. No one was there. But as she looked down, her heart skipped. On the glass, clear as day, was a small handprint. It wasn't hers. It was too small, like a child's. She stumbled back, knocking over a lamp. The sound echoed in the silent room. For a moment she thought she saw something move outside, a flicker of red near the edge of the parking lot. But when she looked again, it was gone. Leah barely slept that night. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw that handprint. The next morning she tried to shake it off. She went to work, forcing a smile, listening to patients talk about their holidays. But as the day went on, she started noticing something strange. One of her patients, an elderly woman named Mrs. Hollis, had been humming a tune while Leah took her blood pressure. A slow, haunting melody that made Leah's stomach twist. She knew that song. It was the same tune that had played from Daniel's music box. Leah froze mid-step. "Sorry, what song is that?" she asked gently. Mrs. Hollis smiled faintly. "Oh, this old thing? My mother used to sing it around Christmas. She said it was a lullaby from her village. Something about lost children finding their way home." Leah felt her throat tighten. "Do you remember what it was called?" The old woman thought for a moment. "I think it was called the Winter Bell. They said if you heard it near Christmas, it meant someone from the other side was trying to find warmth again." Leah felt a chill crawl down her spine. That night, when she returned home, she couldn't stop hearing that melody. Every noise, the hum of her fridge, the wind against the window, somehow matched the rhythm of that song. She made tea, turned on the TV, anything to drown it out. But when she went to throw out the trash, she froze. Right outside her door was a small, silver bell. She crouched down slowly, picking it up with trembling fingers. It was cold, too cold as if it had been left in snow for hours. She placed it on the counter and stepped back, her mind racing. The rational part of her tried to explain it away. Maybe a neighbor dropped it. Maybe a kid from the building upstairs lost it. But deep down she already knew whose bell it was. She thought about calling the police again but stopped. What would she even say? A bell appeared outside my door? They'd think she was losing her mind. Instead, she decided to stay somewhere else, her friend Megan's place across town. She grabbed her overnight bag, jacket, and keys. As she locked the door, she heard it again, faint from somewhere down the hall. A child's giggle. She froze, her breath caught. Slowly she turned. The hallway lights flickered once, twice, then steadied. At the far end, where the shadows met the stairwell, stood a small figure in a red coat. Leah's chest tightened. "Hello," she whispered. The figure didn't move. Leah took a step forward. The floor creaked beneath her. Another giggle echoed softly, only now it was closer, almost beside her. She spun around. No one. When she looked back down the hallway, the figure was gone. Her heart hammered in her chest as she rushed toward the elevator, pressing the button over and over. The doors finally opened and she stepped inside, hitting the ground floor button repeatedly. As the elevator descended, the lights flickered again. The air grew cold, her breath visible. Then came the faint sound of the bell. Jingle, jingle. Leah pressed herself against the wall, her pulse racing. The sound grew louder, echoing inside the small space. Then silence. The elevator doors slid open. The lobby was empty. She ran out into the cold night air, fumbling for her keys as she reached her car. Her hands shook so badly she dropped them twice. She climbed in, locked the doors, and started the engine. The headlights illuminated the parking lot, rows of cars, silent and still. She exhaled shakily, forcing herself to breathe. Then, in the rearview mirror, she saw it. A smudge, faint but visible, on the back window. A handprint. Small. Perfectly formed. Leah drove off without looking back. As she sped through the empty streets, her mind raced. Who was that girl? Why her? The old woman's words echoed in her head, someone from the other side trying to find warmth again. She thought about Daniel, a man she'd never met, but whose story she'd read in the paper that morning. A local blog had written about his strange disappearance, mentioning the footprints, the music box, and the knocks. 3 knocks. Leah's grip tightened on the steering wheel. Her car radio crackled softly, static filling the silence. Then, faintly through the static, a child's voice came through. Cold? The radio cut out completely. Leah's breathing quickened. She pulled over near a gas station, trying to calm herself. She turned off the car, hands gripping the wheel so tightly her knuckles were white. Outside, the snow had stopped falling. The world was still, quiet, almost peaceful again. Until she saw them, footprints. Small, bare, and wet, appearing one after another across the snowy pavement, moving toward her car. Leah stared, frozen in place, watching them form in real time, as if invisible feet were pressing into the snow. They stopped right by her driver's side door. Then came 3 slow knocks on the glass. Tap, tap, tap. Leah didn't dare look. She kept her eyes on the dashboard, her breath shallow, her mind screaming at her to drive. But she couldn't move. The silence stretched for what felt like forever. Then from just outside the window, a whisper, soft and almost kind. Can I come in? Leah shut her eyes. And that's when she heard it, faint at first but growing clearer, the same lullaby Daniel had heard, playing through her car speakers. Some say she was found the next morning, her car parked by the gas station, engine running, doors locked from the inside. She was safe, shaken but alive. But when she told her story, no one believed her. They said trauma can play tricks on the mind. The darkness pressed in so thick it felt alive. The car sat half buried in snow, its headlights flickering weakly before dying out completely. The only sound left was the soft, rhythmic ringing of the bells outside. It echoed around them, near and far, as if the whole forest was breathing in time with the sound. No one moved. Tom's breath came in shallow bursts, his eyes fixed on the windshield, waiting for something, anything, to move. But there was nothing. Just the black outline of trees against the storm. Then, slowly, the bell stopped. The silence that followed was heavier than sound. Sarah was the first to speak, her voice trembling. We have to get out. We can't just sit here. Tom didn't answer. His hands were still gripping the steering wheel, knuckles white. Finally, he said, almost whispering, if we leave the car, we're walking right into it. What if we stay? Olivia said quietly. What if that's worse? Mark rubbed his forehead, his voice shaking. Maybe it's the storm messing with our heads. Maybe we didn't really see. But then the car rocked. Just once, but hard enough to jolt all 4 of them. They froze. Snow slid off the roof with a dull thump. Mark turned slowly toward Tom. Did that come from outside? Before anyone could answer, the car rocked again, harder this time. Something heavy was moving along the roof. They could hear it, the crunch of snow shifting, the faint drag of fingers across metal. Sarah clutched the seat in front of her. Tom? Don't move, he hissed. A moment later, the sound stopped. The world went still again. Then, softly, something tapped on the windshield. What? Twice. 3 times. Tap, tap, tap. Mark raised the flashlight, hands shaking, and shone it toward the glass. At first they saw only frost. But then, as the beam steadied, letters began to form in the fog, slow, deliberate strokes written by an unseen hand. Ichoami. Sarah covered her mouth. What does that mean? No one answered. Tom reached for the door handle, but before he could open it, a loud crash came from behind them, the trunk. It sounded like someone had slammed it shut from the outside. Olivia turned, eyes wide. It's in the car. Mark shook his head. No, that's impossible. The doors are locked.